we're going to pick up with the Torah reading. I hope everybody can hear me. That's really trippy. We're going to use one camera this time. Maybe that makes things better. Maybe it makes things worse. We're going to see. We're in Exodus.
Facebook versus YouTube studio.
I know.
All out.
All right. We're in Exodus 13. What verse are we in? 19?
19.
Okay. No, we're not 19.
Really?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because you ended and you said we were about to get into the angel. God, do this thing. And we're about to see that the process for parting the seas is a process.
Yeah. No, we're not. We're in. Oh, you mean 14:19?
Oh, what I said.
My bad. I thought you said 13:19. Okay, got you. Yep, that's right. 14:19. You're absolutely right. So we're going to start with Exodus chapter 14, verse 19, but we're not. We're going to start with prayer. So, Yeshua, thank you. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the Torah. I ask that you would prove yourself as Messiah, prove yourself as powerful to those who are listening to us, speak to us, testify to our conscience that we are yours, that we belong to you. Change the way we act, change the way we talk, change the way we think, change the way that our hearts approach you. Give us softer and softer hearts. I pray, Yeshua, that we would look like you, we would sound like you, that we would talk like you. I ask that you remove from me the leaven of hypocrisy, my insincerity. I lay before you the way that my speech doesn't mirror my heart. Bring them into perfect unity. And I pray that my heart would be yours, that my heart would be under the beck and call, ready to minister, awaiting with readiness the word of Messiah. I pray that the word of Messiah, the prophetic word of Messiah, would dwell in me richly, and that I would speak what you tell me to say. And I just pray that you would give me a concern for the hearts of people that are going to see this that's greater than the concern for the material. I confess to you, Yeshua, that I get bogged down in the material, and I love your word and your scripture, but I can get so bogged down that I miss that your desire is for this to point to you and for consciences to come to you and find life and be filled with eternal life and take hold of eternal life. And these scriptures are the ones that talk to you. I don't want to be one of the fools who's borrowing the way from people going to you to have life. I'm reminded where you say that there are people who they don't go into the gates of heaven, but they themselves stand at the gates and bar other people from entering. I don't want to do that. I want to be a slave of you, Messiah. And I just pray over us, Isaiah 53. I pray to walk in your way. He was despised and he was rejected by people. I pray, Lord, that we would walk in the same path. We would understand how you revealed yourself to us. Help us to love you and to fulfill your heart. And I pray that I pray that you would fill us with joy and show us the love of God in this text. I ask it in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, so we're starting in 14:19. So why don't you go ahead and read it in English, Tony?
And the angel of God who was going before the camp of Israel set out and went behind them. And the column of cloud set out ahead of them. It stood still behind them. Okay.
I want to think of a format for this that is better. And this is, we're experimenting each time we do this. So, yes, bless you, Rhonda. All right, thank you. So let's try to think of a format. You just read it in English. And at the very least, it's helpful here. Having the Hebrew in front of us is helpful. Because we can verify what words there are. When we get to talking about the person of Yahweh and who he is and how is he understood by Israel, the language becomes really important, because a lot of the way that we tend to approach God in the West, we have a lot of theological traditions that we kind of bring down to bear on the translation. So let's take a look at 19 in Hebrew and see. Let's see what it says. So lifnei machane, before the face of the camp Yisrael, before the face of the camp of Israel. Let's see, am I missing something here? Yeah, vayisa malacha Elohim. Okay, so and he was traveling. Vayisa, he which I think comes from the verb nasa, right? Yeah, it comes from nasa. He was traveling, malacha Elohim, the angel of the God, not an angel of God. Malach ha Elohim, the angel of the God. He was going before the camp of Israel. This angel of God figure, if you'll go back, I would just challenge anyone to go search the Torah. Go into the Torah, and I'll actually give an example of this. I think it's Genesis 45. I could be wrong. It could be 48:15. We're going to find out right now if I'm right or wrong. It's not 45. Let's see. Genesis 48:15, is it? Yes. Genesis 48:15 through 16. And he blessed, this is Jacob blessing Joseph. And he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, Ha Elohim asher hidhalchu avatai. So the Elohim, the God who shepherded me all my life unto this day, the angel who redeemed me from all evil, okay, Hamalach, okay, may he bless the boys. May he bless the boys. So I have an example in the Torah in Genesis 48:15 where the God, grammatically, the God who Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob walked in front of, is the God who shepherded Jacob all the days of his life, is the angel that redeemed Jacob from all evil. May he bless the boys. One being. And it has more to do with function, okay, like the function of these titles, God and Malach or messenger. It's almost like part of the issue, again, I talk about this a lot, throne theology. And how do we address the fact that Yahweh wants to be close to us in our life, visit us, be in our presence, and at the same time, he is enthroned forever. That's a key idea for ancient Israelites. Yahweh is enthroned forever. He never leaves his throne. If Yahweh were to leave his throne, that's synonymous with saying Yahweh's not God. Yahweh's not king. Yahweh's not in control. So as cosmic king, he never leaves his throne. So if he never leaves his throne, how does he come to us? It's kind of a conundrum. We all know that it's confusing that I'd be sitting in South Carolina talking to Yeshua, and someone in Zimbabwe right now is talking to Yeshua, and someone in the Philippines is talking to Yeshua, and he's giving each of us his undivided attention. This is nonsense, and yet this is how he operates this way. And I mean it nonsense in the sense that experientially to us, we have no point of reference. It's nonsense to us experientially as humans. And so the ancient Israelites, they dealt with this by saying, well, God is on his throne, and he sends the messenger of his presence. So it's the idea of it's answering the question, how can God be in two places at once? There are a lot of philosophical approaches how to answer this question. The Israelites answered this question by saying his messenger, the messenger of his presence, was there. It's not a lesser being. It is Yahweh. And actually, we're going to see this. It's kind of fun in Exodus. So let's jump back to Exodus 14, verse 19. And we have the angel of God was going before the camp of Israel, okay, and the column of cloud set out ahead of them, and it stood still behind them, so that it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. And it was a dark, sorry, go ahead and read. Why don't you read 20?
So that it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and it was a dark cloud, but it gave light to the night, so that neither approached the other all night.
Yeah, so it looks like, so basically the cloud, which the angel of God is inside of, okay, goes ahead of the people up to a point, and then goes behind the people to be a barricade or a barrier between Israel and Egypt. You follow that motion? It's kind of a convoluted sentence in English. So basically it sets out ahead of them. This column of cloud set out ahead of them, and then it stood still behind them, so that it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel. So it was leading the way, and then when they start to get close to the Red Sea, it comes behind as a barricade to block them. What it does is it creates a barricade so that neither approach the other all night. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh moved the sea with a strong east wind all night, and he made the sea become dry ground, and the waters were divided. Okay.
Now this is interesting. This idea of dividing waters is, let's see, this is verse 21, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vayet Moshe at Yado al Hayam Vayaled. Yeah, Vayolech Yahweh et Hayam. He walked the water in the wind. It's funny. Through the wind, he walked the water with an eastern wind, a strong eastern wind, all the night. And he placed the sea. Let's see. And he placed the sea as dry ground. He made the sea as dry ground, and he divided the water. This idea of God dividing the water is actually, in part, it's a picture that's very similar to what God does in creation. To create the three spaces, the three functional spaces of Genesis days 1 through 3, God actually creates through division. He'll divide. So he divides the darkness, and then in that new space, he creates light. It's called day. Okay, but he divides the darkness. He divides the water beneath to the water above with the rakia. Okay, and then he divides the ocean from the land. He causes the land to rise up out of it. So there are these acts of division he's creating. Keep that in mind. He's about to create a nation. He is about to create a people. So this is also where we get the idea that baptism, which is death and rebirth, baptism, which is death and the forces of tohu vavohu and destruction being overcome by the order of creation, is about to take us. So, and time out. How does God do it here? Through his spirit hovering or standing there and doing this. This is exactly like Genesis 1:2. So the wind, the word for spin, it's wind. And it's a funny thing because it's an eastern wind. And a way to translate this, if you wanted to be overly literal, is a ancient wind. Okay, because the word for antiquity is east. Right. And so we have this picture here that, like, we need to read this in light of what happened, in light of the Bereshit story in Genesis. But back to this figure of Yahweh. And so Yahweh moves the sea it actually says in Hebrew, he walks the sea with a strong east wind, which is kind of funny. He causes it to walk. But Yahweh moves the sea, okay, through the night. He's doing this. And the Israelites entered the middle. Sorry, go ahead, read 22.
And the Israelites entered the middle of the sea on the dry land. The waters were a wall for them on their right and on their left.
Okay, let's just back up and make sure. Who is doing this? Who's walking the sea with a strong east wind?
Yahweh.
Yes, Yahweh. Its name is Yahweh. Okay. And then Israelites enter in the middle of the sea on the dry ground. The waters were a wall for them on their right and their left. That's verse 22. And that would look like, let's see here. But Yavo B'nai Israel, B'toch Hayam, yep. B'yabashah. Yeah, and they're on this dry ground on their right and on their left. And then we get, so Yahweh's using this wind and doing this. And then we get verse 23.
And the Egyptians gave chase and entered after them, all the horses of Pharaoh, his chariots and his charioteers, into the middle of the sea.
Now, here's an interesting picture. This idea of the chariots and charioteers is interesting because this is going to be depicted as a battle between Yahweh and Pharaoh. Pharaoh's chariots and Yahweh's chariots.
Okay.
If you get it when you later on, and as this develops, it's going to happen later in Exodus. It's going to happen at the end of Exodus with the construction of the tabernacle, which is a visible structure that's supposed to mirror invisible structures. Yahweh sits on cherubim. The cherubim are his chariots. Okay. And he rides on the wings of the wind in this way. Okay.
Right.
And so this is going to be depicted as a battle between Yahweh and Pharaoh. It's like, oh, well, Josh, are you reaching? Is this abstract? This is so funny how Westerners do this. He literally said before, be still and I'll fight for you.
Right.
We automatically make this like metaphorical. He's not really fighting. The narrative's really cool. So
yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So now we're going to get to verse 25. And this...
Or 24 first.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we're going to get to verse 24. And verse 24 is the clincher for the point that I'm making.
Right.
The angel of, Malach Elohim, the angel of God, is Yahweh. They're one and the same. And the proof of this is, where is the angel of God?
In the cloud.
In the cloud. Same way that Yahweh was called the angel of God in the beginning of Exodus in the bush. They're in the cloud. Now look at verse 24, one of my favorite verses. Where is Yahweh? He's doing all this stuff. Where is he? Verse 24, read that.
And during the morning watch, Yahweh looked down to the Egyptian camp from in the column of fire and cloud, and he threw the Egyptian camp into a panic.
Okay. He isn't in Shemay Shemayim. Shemay Shemayim is heaven of heavens, okay, in the unseen realm, okay. Vayihi Ba'ash Moret, so in that watch, in that morning watch, that early watch, Haboker, this watch of the morning. Vayash Kaif. Yash Kaif. It's from Shachaf, to look down from above. Vayash Kaif, Yahweh. And he, Yahweh, looked down from a height, El Machane Mitzrayim, onto the camp of Egypt, Ba'amud, in the cloud, or the column, in the cloud of fire, or the column of fire, rather, Amud, in the standing column of fire, Va'anan, V'yaham et Machane Mitzrayim, and Yaham is to disturb. Hamam, it's actually like he. So okay, yeah, it's a final mem verb. To disturb, be beside oneself. He causes them to be confused. He strikes them with confusion.
Okay. Which is
local,
militant.
It's militant. It's a military endeavor, and he strikes them with confusion. And this is really cool. This is Yahweh fighting on behalf of his people to achieve the Exodus. If this is a text that demonstrates that baptism is part of warfare. Baptism is seen as ritual warfare. Well, why are you talking about baptism? Paul will talk about ablutions and baptisms in light of covenants, and he'll say, our fathers were baptized into the cloud in the name of and into Moses and into the waters. They walked in and they came out, and that's compared to our baptism.
Okay.
Now this is going to be
from slavery into freedom.
Not just that, and the baptism itself. This is a strange thing. The thing that causes us, so the waters, we interact with the waters. The thing that we interact with the waters, people of God interact with the waters. They come out renewed. The enemy interacts with the waters and they're drowned and destroyed.
And that's okay.
That's identical as well to Noah. This is the same idea. God's people they have a thing prepared for them, a vessel and a means prepared for them. They pass through the waters and they survive, but the waters destroy the enemies of God, these unseen powers and humans allied together. It is a defeat of the gods. This is warfare. Now, what's interesting is I'm just like it's such a funny thing to hear people talk about angelology and all their weird depictions of God's omnipresence and all this kind of stuff. The Torah says really carefully, Yahweh's in the cloud. There's no way around it. Now, I love that they use the name Yahweh, okay, or Yahweh. I don't care how you pronounce it. This figure is the God you're supposed to bow down to, prostrate, and worship, and love, and give all your fealty and all your devotion. And there he is, locally. We also know that he's also in the heavens. Another great verse to go to is Genesis 19, verse 24. And yeah, that's right, Rhonda. Salvation of the righteous, death to the unrighteous. And this is actually quite dark. I'm actually going to build on that because their understanding, their depiction of the world, they understood Sheol to be watery depths. Go and check Psalm 18. Psalm 18 is a messianic psalm that's quoted by Paul and applied to Yeshua. It's written by David. He talks about the watery depths of Sheol. Okay, Sheol is spoken of as watery depths that you sink down in. Right. Part of this is because they understood that the cosmic waters were held back by the Rakia, and on the outskirts or edges of it, underneath the base, Sheol or watery depths. Okay, Messiah descends into watery. That's his baptism. Messiah's baptism is death. That's what Mark says. So in the book of Mark, he says to his two disciples, James and John, will you guys undergo the baptism I will undergo? They say, yes, Lord, we will. He says, you will undergo that baptism, but it's not up for me to decide. It's my Father. Yeshua had already been baptized by John. What baptism he's talking about? He's talking about his death. Mark tells us explicitly. How is Yeshua's death a baptism? Because he descends into the watery grave of Sheol. Time out. This is also helpful. They thought of Sheol as the watery depths. How do we know this? Jonah. Jonah says in chapter 2, I have descended down into the watery grave and into the watery depths of Sheol. Messiah prophesied, the only sign this generation will receive is the sign of Jonah.
Interesting.
So there's this idea that the same way that he descends into death, but then comes out alive.
Yes.
Okay, this is a picture of the Exodus. This is a picture of Israel's called God's firstborn son. In a way, this is the birth of a nation. This is the birth of Israel, okay, the new creation of Israel, new birth. So all these concepts are kind of interlocked as we see Scripture grow over time with different prophets adding, different books. It's picked up in Jonah, it's picked up in Isaiah. These are important concepts, and it's definitely what Yeshua picks up on in his own earthly ministry when he's a living, breathing parable and he's talking about these things. So we see Yahweh at war for his people locally, fighting for them, and he's defeating them. He's defeating Egypt. So
he threw them into a panic.
He throws them into a panic. Yeah, he confuses them and throws them into a panic. In verse 26.
5.
Sorry.
And he removed the wheels of their chariots so that they drove them with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, "We must flee away from Israel because Yahweh is fighting for them against Egypt."
Okay, there he is. They understand it. We should understand it too. So Yahweh is fighting. He is fighting for his people. Now, here's what's interesting too. Well, what is Yeshua? Who is Yeshua in this? No, he's a complicated figure. King Messiah is a complicated figure. He came to fulfill multiple strands of prophecy. He came to fulfill multiple roles and functions. Messiah is functioning as Israel. Messiah is functioning as Moses. Messiah is functioning as the local Yahweh. But here's an interesting depiction. Paul talks about how one of the reasons Yeshua came as a living parable. He came to test them as a living. The incarnation is a living, breathing parable to test them. Paul will say in Corinthians, to the letter of the Corinthians, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory if they'd known it was him. So imagine this. When the local Yahweh makes war against the powers, they're thrown into confusion. When does Yeshua make war against the powers? Colossians tells us when he triumphs over them, parading them in a military defeat on the cross. He has thrown them into confusion.
Okay.
They don't know what's going on. They have secured kingdom. The very act that they thought, this is the act we're going to take to defeat the people of God, becomes the stepping stone to their victory. And that's the cross, okay, the prison of death, this very thing. So they thought that we've got our charioteers, we're strong, we've got Israel cornered, we're about to encircle Israel, and this is the very moment that they ensure their own demise and Israel's victory.
Okay.
So that's a clear connection with this idea of how does this correlate to the gospel. And so we have... Yeah, okay, and now, Yahweh, they're terrified, their chariots are kind of screwing up and stuff. And then verse 26.
And Yahweh said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, and let the waters return over the Egyptians, over their chariots, and over their charioteers."
Yeah.
The idea that he uses return here always trips me up. Because, I kind of think about the curse of Tad, or part of the curse of Adam, too.
Yep.
Adam. From the dust you came, to the dust you'll return. So, in a way, it's he doesn't make the water, right? He just hovers over the waters from the beginning.
Yeah, the darkness and the Tahom, the darkness and the deep waters they're depicted as part of Tohu Vohu, and they're there.
Yeah. So then, in this case, essentially, is Yahweh saying, "I held open the waters for the righteous children, and I'm just not going to hold the waters up for you"?
This is very similar to what I said with the ark. So man has filled the world with... let's go to Noah's Ark. Before that, let's talk about the time in the Torah describing the sons of God go into the daughters of men. They produce and multiply oppression and Hamas, violence and wickedness, and they pervert and destroy God's good creation. And in a way, this is very similar. Yahweh behaves the same throughout the Torah. The same way we saw him deal with Pharaoh and say, you want the land? I'll give it to you the way I found it.
Right.
Tohu vohu. In a way, he's going to say, when the waters return, that's what happens in they believe there's the cosmic deep that's divided by the Shemayim, right?
Right.
And what does Yahweh do when they behave and destroy the Creator? He's like, fine, if you want this world, wicked humans in Genesis 6, you'll have it the way. I'll return it to its original state.
Cover it in the water.
The water from above starts to pour down, and the water from beneath starts to fill up.
So the divide starts to close.
They return. The waters return.
That's interesting.
The waters return to the state prior to creation.
Prior to his hand moving.
Prior to his hand moving and prior to his act of creation.
So then, in a sense, he is saying that to these people.
Yeah, he's let it. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
ones who are faithful to me, I'll do these. I'll let them walk in the.
They will live, and the others will perish.
Right. Okay.
The waters become the means of new birth for the people of God, those who exercise faithfulness in Him, and they become the means of destruction itself for those who do not. This is death, and new birth on the other end. It's a very beautiful picture of the idea of resurrection. The Israel that goes in doesn't come out the same.
Right.
And so
death and resurrection. So then the same is made in perfecting. Right. Yeshua's sacrifice being made perfect.
Say again. What do you mean?
Like the same Israelite who went in isn't the same.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Paul will make this point explicitly. He was died in ignominy and weakness, but was raised in strength and the power of God. That's a point in Romans, actually. And it's a key idea in Paul's thought and the way he talks about the gospel and he explains what happens with Yeshua.
Probably just coincidence.
Yeah, maybe. And okay, so we have they return. The waters return and they cover the chariots and the charioteers all the army. And no, not even one survived them. They get destroyed. But the Israelites walked on the dry land in the middle of the sea. The waters were a wall for them on the right and the left. They repeat that same idea in 29. Okay.
So then was the fire still following at the tail end so that the Egyptians couldn't overtake them?
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole way, that's what gives them a lead on the Egyptians. They all make it out. And as soon as they make it out, he's like, now cover them up.
Yeah, you can imagine a really, really stormy situation. So he's holding back the first off, it's a pretty, I've seen a simulation, you can look it up on YouTube. They did a simulation for what kind of steady wind would be required for, I think it's something small. It's I'm mixing it up in my head. Either it's 26 miles an hour winds or 62 miles an hour winds to sustain blowing the water in one consistent direction. But this is a really, really rough, stormy situation. And not only that, he's using these conditions to screw up their chariots. So it actually does make it difficult for them to navigate and move ahead.
So it's the same wind that parts the water that rips the wheels off.
It seems that way. It seems that these conditions that are holding back the waters are also screwing up the charioteers' progress.
Which, yeah, that's interesting. That's what they put their hope in, anyways. And he's like,
"We trust in Yahweh, not in chariots."
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think it's possible that the very fact of them using horses and chariots could partly be why their passage wasn't possible. So if you want a soging, those who trust in chariots, like the very thing they trust in will be their demise when they try to go on the path that God prepares. It's this test, this path. Whoever can survive the path through the waters will come out to new life. And whoever doesn't will die. Now, this is very similar to the end of Isaiah 66, what we're about to see. Verse 30. You want to read verse 30?
Yeah. And Yahweh saved Israel on that day from the hand of Egypt, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea.
This is like the end of 66 of Isaiah. The end of Isaiah says Yahweh is going to effect the salvation, and we will see this everlasting salvation, but we will see the corpses of the people destroyed in the valley of Gehenna. And this is a prototype for that idea in the Torah, that we have this dramatic showdown, Yahweh and his people versus the powers and their people, and they are defeated. And what's left, the remnant that's left, is the water destroys those who are not the people of God, and the people of God are saved themselves, and they're delivered, and they look on and see the corpses.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's an important picture because I'll actually go to Isaiah 66. Isaiah picks up this idea, and Isaiah in a lot of places rehashes the rescue of the people of Israel. He'll repeat that idea as a theme in his book, a reminder. There's like a new Exodus that's coming, and I'm jumping to the very last chapter of Isaiah. Yeah. And they shall. So he talks about something strange that's going to happen with the nations. And he says, and they shall declare my glory among the nations and bring all your countrymen from all the nations as an offering to Yahweh on horses and chariots and in litters and mules and camels to my holy mountain, Jerusalem, says Yahweh. These other nations will bring the Judeans as offerings to Jerusalem, just as the sons of Israel bring an offering and a clean vessel to the house of Yahweh. And indeed, I will take some of them as priests and as Levites. Now, some people want to say it's the Jews who are brought back who are taken as Levites and priests. I think it means the Gentiles are taken as priests. So it's a strange picture. But then he says, for just as the new heavens and new earth that I'm about to make shall stand before me, declares Yahweh, so shall your descendants and your name stand. And this shall happen. And this is a very strange picture. And this shall happen from new moon to new moon and from Shabbat to Shabbat. All flesh shall come to bow and worship before me, says Yahweh. And they shall go out and look at the corpses of the people who have rebelled against me. For their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be an abhorrence to all flesh. Now, at this point, flesh isn't bad. All flesh will come and bow and worship to me.
Okay.
All that are living will look and see these corpses. This seems to be an eschatological picture, and it's very similar to what we see in Exodus 14.
Okay.
All right.
And Israel saw the great hand that Yahweh displayed against Egypt. And the people feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh and in Moses, his servant.
Yeah.
That takes us to 15.
Yeah, that's right. And Israel saw the great hand that Yahweh displayed against Egypt, and the people feared Yahweh, and they believed in Yahweh and in Moshe, his servant. Key word. I'm going to say this in verse 31. Vayosher Yahweh bayom hahu et Yisrael miyad Mitzrayim vayareh Yisrael. So they feared. No. Vayareh Yisrael et Mitzrayim mate al shafot. They saw, and Israel saw Israel saw Egypt die. Al shafat hayam. It's on the edge of the sea. And Israel saw the great hand which Yahweh made in Egypt, and they feared the people God Yahweh. Vayat aminu, they declared as faithful. They believed is a very weird way. They deemed faithful.
Okay.
This is faith. There's a picture of faithfulness, covenant faithfulness. They deemed faithful. At this point, this is the point where they deemed faithful Yahweh, uva Moshe avdo. Eved, the Eved Yahweh, the servant of Yahweh. This is this figure, the servant of Yahweh, is a figure, this idea, this concept, this role that occurs in the Torah in multiple places. There is this idea that it floats around among people who follow Yeshua that he's just, all he is some hyper, the humanity is an imitation and a game. He winks at us. He's not really human. I'm the second person of the Trinity. And as soon as he dies and appears to be human, whatever, and then he, it's almost like for them, the incarnation is, I'm going to do a polar bear plunge. And then he comes in the resurrection and says, oh, I'm done with that human stuff. And now I'm back to being second person. Okay. Messiah is a human. He is Yahweh as a human. But he clothes himself in humanity and never takes it off. So he forever fulfills these functional roles of servant of Yahweh, right? The servant of Yahweh, this phraseology, Moses here is the servant of Yahweh, but the servant of Yahweh in Isaiah 53 is going to be this Davidic descendant who accomplishes rescue and salvation. These ideas are interlocked.
Okay.
And so in this way, we end up with this interesting picture that the future servant of Yahweh is this hyper intensified. It's Yahweh fulfilling these roles himself. And this Isaiah is key in understanding this because it basically says, here's all these empty offices. Isaiah is going to depict the picture that in the exile, there's all these empty offices, and Yahweh looks and says, who will fulfill these things for me? Who will stand in the gap and do this? And he saw that there was no one. Lo, I myself, behold, I will step in the gap. My own right arm will satisfy me, and I'll fulfill these roles. And so that's this picture of Yeshua stepping in, or Yahweh stepping in and as Yeshua. So we're in 15. Okay, this is really cool. They're singing to Yahweh.
Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to Yahweh, and they said, "Let me sing to Yahweh because he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he hurled into the sea. Yah is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. Yahweh is a man of war. Yahweh is his name.
Yeah.
The chariots of Pharaoh and his army he cast into the sea, and his choice adjutants."
They had in his choice adjutants were sunk.
Adjutants.
That's a funny word. What do they mean? Marchavot paro.
Sunk in the Red Sea.
Chelo yara. Yeah, he throws them. Vayam u mivchar shalishав, his charioteer, and the choicest, that the elect of his charioteers. Tava, they sunk down in the Red Sea.
The deep waters covered them. They went down into the depths like a stone. Yahweh, your right hand is glorious in power. Yahweh, your right hand destroyed the enemy. And in the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew those standing up to you. You released your fierce anger, and it consumed them like stubble. And by the breath of your nostrils, waters were piled up. Waves stood like a heap. Deep waters in the middle of the sea congealed. The enemy said, "I will pursue you. I will overtake. I will divide plunder. My desire will be full of them. I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them." You blew with your breath. The sea covered them. They dropped like lead in the mighty waters. Who is like you among the gods, Yahweh? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praiseworthy actions, doing wonders? You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. In your loyal love, you led the people whom you redeemed. In your strength, you guided them to the abode of your holiness. Peoples heard. They trembled.
Okay, let's stop here because we're about to transition to the concern for the other nations. And just scaling back and thinking about this. So he sings this song to Yahweh. This song of Moses gets picked up in the book of Revelation. It's the song of Moses. They sang the song of Moses. And he's singing to Yahweh. But what's interesting is he calls Yahweh a man of war. And his name is Yahweh. And he depicts Yahweh going to battle with a drawn sword. This is the local Yahweh. This is how he's depicted. Isaiah is going to pick up these pictures, and he's going to talk about Yahweh bearing the sword, but also he's going to talk about the servant of Yahweh who also has a sword. And he wields the sword to do battle. He defeats the enemy. He casts them down. I also want to put out there, this is very similar to Yeshua saying, "Woe to you who give causes for stumbling and sin. It's better for a millstone to be tied around and you sink to the depths and be thrown in." Right? This is also an idea that's picked up in Revelation, where Babylon is depicted in a symbol where an angel takes a giant stone and throws it into the sea and it doesn't rise. Well, why doesn't it rise?
It's a stone.
Because it's kavod, it's heavy, it's glorious, right? What would that mean if somebody walked on water? Interesting idea.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
They're light.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, so it's just it's an interesting idea. Partly because Yahweh is called the water walker, because when he's depicted as riding on the storm clouds in these higher heights, he's kind of this water walker. So it's a warrior picture. It's a depiction of him having control over these elements and going to war.
Okay.
So the deep waters covered them. They go down to the depths like a stone. Yahweh, your right hand is glorious in power. Yahweh, your right hand destroyed the enemy. Some of this is a picture of the idea that, well, another way to deal with the confusion of Yahweh being in two places at once is an interesting metaphor. So you have multiple metaphors that they use. They're aware of these issues and the complexities of saying Yahweh can be in two places at once. Another metaphor is Yahweh is just one composite being, and his head is in the heavens, but he reaches down underneath the heavens, his right arm, and his right arm does stuff. Okay, yeah. And his right arm fights, and his right arm beats Egypt, and his right arm, and it's like, oh, it's just one person doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's actually a way that they get. That's another way. So when they talk about his right arm, they're talking about his local interaction.
Okay.
And And the greatness of your majesty, you overthrew those standing up to you. You released your fierce anger, and it consumed them like stubble. And by the breath of your nostrils, waters were piled up. There's a sword that proceeds from Yahweh's mouth, or from the mouth of this servant in Isaiah. This is very similar to these ideas. Yahweh going to war with a sword, and the sword of the Spirit, the words that Messiah himself speaks. So you take, for example, for us as followers of Messiah, when it says, let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, that doesn't mean go and study the red letters in the book of Matthew,
Right.
and have them memorized. It means the word that Messiah living inside you, the living oracles, the living word of the Messiah speaking in your conscience, saying, say this. Don't prepare what you're going to say before him. I have a sword that comes out of my mouth, and it's my very words, and you will speak these words, and you'll overcome with my words that I give you in the moment, the fresh words that I give you to say. And so we should hear, let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, is an admonition towards spiritual warfare, an admonition towards advancing kingdom, not like memorizing the Gospels.
Right.
You blew your breath, the sea covered them, they dropped like lead in the mighty waters. Now, this is an interesting phrase, verse 11. So verse 11 it says, who is like you among the gods, Yahweh? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praiseworthy actions, doing wonders? We already know that their gods are being put on trial. This is not, they're not talking about imaginary gods.
Right.
They're talking about actual Elohim. In the same way that the New Testament says Satan, Hasatan, is the god of this age. He's the god of this age. We already know from a prior Torah reading that God is going to judge the gods of Egypt. Yahweh is going to judge the gods of Egypt. And now he literally gets to ask the culmination, after all these plagues and all these ways that he's judged their gods, this final culmination, will their powers be able to protect their prince, Pharaoh?
Okay.
Will their powers be able to empower their army? Yahweh's hosts versus their hosts.
Okay.
And we end up with this question in verse 11. Mi kamocha ba'elim, who is like you in the gods, Yahweh? Mi kamocha ne'edar, who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome or fearful in boasting or boastworthy doings, mighty Pele, mighty miracles. So they're making a big deal out of Yahweh, and they're saying, you do these actions and nobody can stand up against you. And it's not because these Elohim are imaginary. These are dark powers that are overcome by Yahweh. And then verse 13, and in your loyal love. Now here's a key word. Okay, I'm gonna touch on something. It's an exegetical point. Why don't you read verse 13?
In your loyal love, you led the people whom you redeemed. In your strength, you guided them to the abode of your holiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nachita, you led or shepherded or conducted the leadership. You led v'chastecha in your loyal love. Okay, this people. Okay, you led the people whom you redeemed, that you bought back. So Yahweh bought them out of Egypt as part of the picture. He bought them out of slavery and redeemed them, took them out of it with a mighty arm. But here's a funny word, in his loyal love. He does this in his loyal love. I really want to challenge people who make love one-dimensional, or they use kind of strange Western frameworks to depict love. And I'll give an example of this, because this happens a lot in popular culture and in popular conversation. And I want to challenge anybody who uses this to enlarge your view of love. They'll say, God's loving up to a point, then he's wrathful. That's nowhere in Scripture. Here we have a clear explanation that love itself expresses wrath. Love expresses wrath. In your loyal love, you redeemed this people. And in your strength, you guided them to the abode of your holiness. Now, test to see what I'm saying. Go to Psalm 136, which refrains, his loyal love endures forever. His loyal love endures forever. One of the things that it says is, and you drowned Pharaoh in the ocean. His loyal love endures forever. Pharaoh and his charioteers. His loyal love endures forever. For example, You would, I think most believers would say Yahweh defeating satanic powers is an act of love. Absolutely true. It's an act of love. Love, one of the ways that love expresses itself is through anger and through wrath. But the caveat is it's erech hapim. When Yahweh reveals who he is, he's slow to anger. So that's a slow process. His loyal, the graciousness and gentleness and compassion of his love is like lightning, and the anger that his love expresses like glaciers. Okay,
Right.
but love necessitates. Okay, I would say that love, one of the core ways that God, who is love, expresses his love is through the act of redeeming innocent, broken, battered people from enemies who are bent on destroying them, people who are bent on hardening their heart and using their will to crush others.
Right.
Love is not passive in that sense. Love is active. It's loyal. Okay, it's put a ring on it kind of love,
Yeah.
not emotions. So, and then we have the second part of verse 13. The whole point of this narrative, what does that sentence say? That's the last sentence. In your strength.
In your strength, you guided them to the abode of your holiness.
Yep.
So to his house.
Which is going to be the mountain, the abode of his holiness.
Sinai.
He said, which is where the bush is. He told Moshe, the sign that this will happen is you'll lead people and they'll worship me on this mountain.
Okay.
He's taking them to meet with them and descend. He's actually going to come in their presence and be with them. It's so funny. If you ask a Westerner, okay, you ask a Protestant, you ask I don't care, a Western Christian, is God the God of all creation? Yes. Well, then why would he make a silly promise like, I'll be your God, you'll be my people? Isn't he the God of all peoples already?
Right.
He's not the God of all peoples. He handed them over. Another thing to say this is when he says, I'll be your God, you'll be my people, he doesn't mean I will abstractly be the creator figure who's in the top position of the hierarchy. What he means is, I'll be near you. I'll be your God means I'll live in the house you build for me, and we'll be peeps. We'll be a family. I'll be your father. You'll be my children. I'll be your husband. You'll be my bride. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to be in your presence. And this is what it was all leading to fulfill the promise that he gave to Abraham, to be in their presence, to be near them. Okay.
So peoples heard, they trembled. This is where we're getting into the other.
Yeah, we're talking about the other nations, which is interesting because it's going to go ahead and talk about the surrounding Canaanite nations' responses to.
So they like retcon this in?
It's an interesting question. It's like, okay, did Moshe write this and add it? Did Moshe originally put this in the song? Was the song composed after the fact? Was this song originally sung and then these components were added to it as they spread out? There's all kinds of possibilities for how it's up in this form in the Torah. But what we know is this song theologically has the idea, this important idea that now that this great power has been defeated, we move on in advancement to advance God's kingdom. And literally, it's his kingdom, and he's just going to take the land. The victory is already performed. God is in their midst, and he's fighting for them, and they're going to walk into these territories and take land. It's the good news of his kingdom. And this is similar to us, that once this Exodus is achieved by Yeshua, the work is done. The power has been, the enemies have been decisively defeated. And now we walk in the strength of that decisive victory, and we go and we take back the land and give it that belongs to Yahweh. Except in this instance, it's not just the land of Canaan; it's all the land. Oh, yeah, everything. In other words, everything that was handed over to the Elohim in Genesis 11. Now we're marching out to take back and give to Yahweh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anguish seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were horrified. Great distress seized the leaders of Moab. All of the inhabitants of Canaan melted away. Terror and dread fell on them. At the greatness of your arm, they became silent like the stone, until your people passed by, Yahweh, until the people whom you brought passed by, to whom you bought passed by.
Mm-hmm. You bought them, yeah.
You brought them and planted them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place you made for yourself to inhabit, Yahweh, a sanctuary, Lord, that your hands established.
This is go ahead and read that last line. 18.
Yahweh will reign as king forever and ever.
Okay, this is a picture of kingdom. Yahweh, when he says he's going to reign as king, you cannot divorce that concept from his locality as a man of war, and you cannot divorce the concept of him reigning as king locally as a man of war from temple. Building an abode and a place for Yahweh and a shrine, okay, for him to live. It's all interconnected and it's kit and caboodle. And this is actually the whole point of the endeavor, to get Yahweh to be with his people, just like he promised Abraham, so that together God will go ahead and go about fulfilling all of his promises to Abraham. In order for God to fulfill his promises to Abraham, he has to first show up and live among them, and then, living among them, lead them into the inheritance, give them victories, take back the land, institute justice, bring peace, all kinds of things, but he has to do it in their presence. And so this is partly why all of Exodus leads up to them getting out. So half of Exodus is getting them away from the powers, okay, separate from underneath the Pharaoh and these other Elohim, and bring them under the kingship of God, not Pharaoh and Pharaoh and the dark Elohim. But now they're transferred from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And they're going to come under the kingship of Yahweh. And the clearest picture of the kingship of Yahweh is, where's my throne?
Yeah.
Build me a throne. What's the throne of the kingdom of God? The ark. They're going to build him a tabernacle, and they're going to move around, and he is establishing the kingdom of God right there, right now. And it's a process. And this idea of sanctuary being connected to kingdom is Yahweh will reign as king forever and ever. Yahweh kingdoms among us is the same as Yahweh lives in a temple. So when Yahweh leaves a temple, Yahweh doesn't reign as king. When Yahweh comes into temple, Yahweh reigns as king.
Okay.
These concepts are interlinked.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. When the horses of Pharaoh came into the sea with his chariots and with his charioteers, Yahweh brought back upon them the waters of the sea. And the Israelites traveled on dry ground through the middle of the sea. And Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took her tambourine in her hand, and all of the women went out after her with tambourines and with dances. And Miriam answered, "Sing to Yahweh, because he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he hurled into the sea."
Yes, this is her response is proper. We are supposed to dance in light of victory. Dancing is also a part of battle for us as priests. So you'll see this with the priest that Yehoshaphat puts at the front of the army. She's a prophetess, and this is the appropriate response. She dances before Yahweh. And it is, for us, the idea of dance and war being interlinked is weird because of how we do military, but that's not a weird idea for ancient tribal peoples, that dancing for some tribal peoples is itself an act of preparing for war, sometimes even an act of continuing and maintaining warfare and engaging.
Okay.
It's to intimidate the enemy. It's to strengthen and stir up the troops.
Right.
So what she is doing is a continuation of Yahweh's act. She's joining in. And she says, "Sing to Yahweh because he's highly exalted, the horse and its rider he hurled into the sea." Which again, I think that comes back to the idea that those who trust in horses, these great, powerful people, certainly they'll beat us and defeat us. They get tossed down because of what Yahweh's done. And the weak and the toddlers and the aged and the elderly, they make it across.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Moses caused Israel to set out from the Red Sea. And they went out into the desert of Shur. And they traveled 3 days in the desert, and they did not find water. And they came to Marah, and they were not able to drink water from Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried out to Yahweh, and Yahweh showed him a piece of wood. And he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There he made a rule and a regulation for them, and there he tested them. And he said, "If you carefully listen to the voice of Yahweh your God, and you keep all his rules, then I will not bring about on you any of the diseases that I brought about on Egypt, because I am Yahweh your healer." And they came to Elim, and 12 springs of water and 70 trees were there, and they encamped there at the water.
Very strange, dude, these words. Yeah. Yeah. B'Shem Shittim. Yeah.
Does the stick in the water have anything to do with Jacob?
What do you mean? Tell me about it.
Because didn't Jacob take a almond tree branch or something like that?
He takes a tree branch and ties it to a particular thing, and animals that are in heat. He uses it to get the speckled and the spotted. We're not exactly told how, but it's like a
Right.
sign. But the fact that it's an almond is interesting because of the sign of the almond branch that's going to take place with Aaron later on in
Right.
years.
Almond and bud.
Bring about images of it. Yeah.
Oh, and then what about the 12 springs and 72?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Trees.
Well, first I want to talk about this because this is interesting. Verse 26, V'yomer im shemoa tishma, if you will surely listen, l'kol Yahweh, listen to the voice of Yahweh, your God. V'ha yashar ba'enav, and you do what's straight or right in his eyes, ta'aseh. V'ha ozinata la'mitzotav, and you listen to his, you heed his commands or listen to his commands. V'shamarta kol chukav, and you guard all of his precepts. Kol hamachala, kol hamachala, all of the sicknesses asher samti b'mitzrayim, all the sicknesses that I placed in Egypt, lo asim alecha, not on you they will be. Okay, not I will place them on you. Because I am Yahweh, your healer. So this is interesting. Healing here, which is a sign and a wonder for them, okay, like in this freedom from disease, is directly correlated to walking in obedience to the commands that God gives, and in light of this new arrangement and setup. So healing is not something that's a weird thing that happened before the great act, or before the Exodus only, and then now we just go back to a normal arrangement. No. I am going to be your vibrancy. I'm going to be your strength. I'm going to be your healer in an ongoing sense.
Right.
So I'm not going to I just wanted to say that here we have this idea that sometimes you have an idea among Christians that when Messiah accomplishes everything he accomplished in this earthly kingdom, there's no more healing. God's not our healer anymore.
There's nothing to be.
I don't think, or that it's just not his setup. And I would just argue that if the Exodus is to be correlated to what Yeshua accomplished, and we are in the process of wandering, which Paul says we're still in the middle of wandering. Okay, mm-hmm. Peter says we're exiles still, we're still in the wilderness, we're wandering, and strangers here. I would say that we should go on expecting Yahweh to be our healer. And there's a relationship between us faithfully walking in his power and in his commands and in the way that he's calling us and our healing. I'd say that there's a connection. So, and then we're I guess we're in 16. Do we want to keep going or want to stop? It's basically 58.
Probably stop. But what about the springs of water and the?
Yeah. What's your question?
The number is like.
It's interesting because the number is there's 12 springs of water, one for each tribe, and 70 palm trees were there. And I don't know if the representation is that the palm trees are like the nations, the 70 nations or something. But it is interesting. We do know that there are 12 tribes, and we know there are going to be 70 judges,
right,
in Israel, right, which correspond to the 70 nations. So yeah, I mean that's how that would be the way I correlate the numbers. I correlated Genesis 10 and the 70 nations, and the 70 judges that are going to come.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And they say, yep, a lot of stuff, man. Good. Any other questions before we pray and get out of here?
No, that's it. That's good.
Want to pray?
Yeah. Yahweh, our healer, Lord. Thank you for healing.
Thank you.
Heal us, Lord.
Worship you.
Heal my sister. Heal my brother, Yeshua. Please,
you're faithful, Yeshua.
You are Yahweh, our healer.
Yes,
thank you for that, Lord. You are Yahweh, deliverer.
Yes.
Yahweh, our mighty King.
Yes.
Yahweh, our commander. Yahweh, a fighter for your people.
Yes, Lord.
Yahweh, Messiah. Salvation follows you.
Yes.
Bless you. Thank you for your salvation. Thank you for considering this. Thank you for all these things, this story that you made, this
Yes, Lord. Speak to us even
path
today.
that you have, Lord, this
Let us hear your voice.
house that you have, that you
see
welcome
your
us
form,
into,
hear
that
your voice,
bring us.
let us know
Thank you for
Yeshua.
that, Jesus. Help us to draw understanding of your character through these words, to understand who you are.
Please, Messiah.
Teach us, Yeshua. Teach us your ways, Lord. Make our path level, Yeshua, and teach us your ways, Lord. Help us to trust you in all of our ways, Lord, to deem you faithful quickly,
Yes, Yeshua.
because you are so faithful. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your patience. Bless you, my Lord. Thank you for this. I want to meditate on these words. I want to meditate on your law, Lord, day and night, Lord. I want to understand you. I want to know you. Thank you for your love of us. Thank you that these words made it to this place, made it to where we could read them. Lord. Help me not to forsake that. Help me not to take that for granted. I ask that you give insight. I ask that you give instruction about the Torah, explanation, understanding, Lord, to your body, to your bride, Lord, that you raise her up to know your words, that you would open in us a desire and a love of your words, the ones that are coming out of your mouth, the ones that have come out of your mouth.
You want speak and say what you want.
Please speak, Lord. I am in that. Speak, please, Yeshua. Thank you. Thank you for being so mighty. Thank you for in your might, Lord, considering us weaklings, considering us, those of us who are weak, Lord. And let us be like the Israelites, to put our faith in you, to walk.
Yes, Messiah. Even
when the thing like that, nothing as powerful as a sea being split open is terrifying, Lord, but to just continue walking and to trust you. You are faithful, Jesus. I thank you for your faithfulness, Yeshua. I thank you for your faithfulness, Lord. I ask for forgiveness because I'm fake. I ask for forgiveness because I'm a fair weather fan. I'm a fair weather fan, Lord. Forgive me of my hypocrisy. Forgive me for only being pumped up and excited or praising and thankful when everything's going well. Lord. Help me be just as energetic in my praise because the victory's already occurred.
Please, Yeshua.
You already went down and shared, came out. You're already resurrected. Help me to dance in light of that love. The life that you have given us is good. The home that lies ahead of us is good, Yeshua.
Yes, Lord. We trust you.
It is flowing with life, Lord.
You're faithful.
I put my faith in you, Yeshua. I put my trust in you, my Lord. Because I believe your testimony. I believe your message. Us that you're real. Convince us. Yeah, Lord, and empower us. Empower us when we go out to tell the world who it now belongs to. And soften hearts, Lord. Soften hearts so that they would believe your message, Yeshua. And help us to do this thing. You had disinherited you, and you split the nations apart, Yeshua. Now you've come back in your life, in your death, and your resurrection. You've come back to claim what is yours. Help us to go boldly with that message into each home. Help us to bring healing there, the healing that comes from you. Help us to bring the gospel of reconciliation, Yeshua, in love, the way that you brought it to us. Thank you, Lord. Unveil your plans. Speak to us as friends. Speak to us as your children. Lord. Speak to us, Lord. Please, Jesus. Please, Jesus. Speak to us, Lord. Thank you for this. Thank you for today. Thank you for your love, Lord. I ask all these things in the power of your name, Yeshua. So be it.
Yes, Lord. Thank you. Amen. All right. Bless you guys.